meeting from our contractor to give us a report on where the project is. And we'll start with introductions, and we'll start with our contractor.
Good afternoon, Zig Worksession-ZCO Consulting.
Dr. Costa.
Dave Training.
I'll be very good.
Amy DeBoski.
You ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time. Fortunately, it's a little bit shorter than it has been in the past, so we'll be able to keep things on track. How's that? And I apologize if I haven't.
Go by the slideshow.
Yeah, I can't find it.
At the top.
Is it at the top? Is that where it is?
Slideshow. I don't know, to the left.
Right there. Oh, back.
Slideshow. Great. New show. Okay, excellent. So we'll talk about the activity on the Synergy project. We'll kind of recap the Blue Ribbon Committee's recommendations. Talk about the outlook of the project and some conclusions. So the activity. The bottom line is the Blue Ribbon Advisory Committee gave you the report last week. I think their most important recommendation was to continue with SAP. They also indicated that you should contract with SAP as a systems integrator following the blueprint, and you should certainly try to get a fixed price arrangement with them. That was the bottom line, I think, out of that report, and that is, I think, the administration is operating on that. The Executive Steering Committee, has been established, and now they are conducting meetings right now on a weekly basis. The Functional Steering Committee, has been reestablished, and those are two items that I had indicated sort of fell by the wayside during the pause and after the administration changeover and so forth. So that seems to ramp back up again appropriately, which is good. Do need to mention that the entire leadership team now for the Synergy project is completely different from what it was prior to the administration change. So that is a change. We do have some holdovers in that group, and there's a FILO senior manager who is continuing on through, and then you've got an individual who was on the technology side that is now heading up the HCM side. So those are the holdovers. Other than that, you've got a fairly significant changeover of the management team. Throughout the pause, as you recall, the time requirements project is continuing. That is nearing conclusion. That is an important piece that needs to be finished so that once and for all the organization can decide, okay, where are we going to run the Kronos transactions in, and it does appear that that's going to be right into SAP. So that's probably what's going to happen, and that's going to mean that the blueprint will then include the requirements for that. Consultants are being brought back on board. They're moving along reasonably well in terms of getting them back. They are different. We're not getting all the same people back, but I think fortunately many of them are actually more experienced, and so that's a good sign as well. And probably will have full staffing for blueprinting by mid-November.
Thank you. Can you pause for a moment? Thank you.
Zig, on these contractors coming back, are they paying their own room and board, or are we doing as we've done with the last administration, renting them apartments?
Well, the apartments that had been rented are still under contract until December. So in other words, they are reusing those as much as they can because it's money already spent.
We're not going out to get rent new ones?
Probably not. I mean, I think they realize that the contractors would prefer not to share apartments. I mean, we've got adult people here, so I think that they're working very hard at making arrangements with the local hotels and so forth so that they can get much better rates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainer. Ms. Johnston.
Sure.
As they're coming back, are we renegotiating contracts? I mean, are these cost plus? I mean, I think, have we gotten to the point where we have have something with SAP? Where are we?
Well, the existing contracts are the ones that are in operation at this point in time. In other words, what we had before is still there. There are some changes, which I think are good changes, they've made some adjustments to the time and expense, to the expense reporting, travel policies, so that they're a little more flexible and a little more meaningful, giving the contractor some opportunities, especially on the West Coast, to go home on the weekends and things like that. So that's a good thing. Now, there's every expectation at the end of Blueprint that these contracts basically are taking everybody up to the end of Blueprint. At the end of Blueprint, that's the major contract that's now being discussed and renegotiated and established, if you will, potentially with SAP. I mean, that's that first recommendation said, okay, go get yourself a systems integrator, have them commit, and have them, in essence, try to obtain a fixed price deal so that you know when is it going to be finished and how much am I going to be able to have to spend. So that's in process, and that will become a different contract then.
And are we allowing some of the blueprint managers or to do some distance implementation? I mean, are we allowing the flexibility?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure.
And getting the cost benefit of having that flexibility?
Yeah, they are doing that. I mean, that's been in existence. I mean, so they're on a 2 weeks on, 1 week off type of situation.
And off, it just means off-site.
Yeah, off-site. They're working, but they're off-site. Thank you, sir.
Just got here, sorry.
Okay. The last item, the Synergy Management Team is bringing the HANA HEC AMS budget approval request to the Assembly. I think we're going to talk some more about that. That is the activity that's going on right now. It's a very important one, and it's on the critical path. So we'll talk some more about that.
One moment, please.
Sure.
Mr. Training?
When is it coming to the Assembly, do we know?
Well, it should come to the Assembly at your next meeting, the 10th meeting.
10th of November?
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Training.
That's what should happen in order for you to maintain pace. And that means that the administration has to follow the general guidelines of the cutoff date, which is, I think, tomorrow. And those are all fairly important, and I'm going to cover that a little bit
I'm just
more.
going to track it. I want to make sure it's done.
Yes, you should.
Thank you, Mr. Training. I need to follow up on Mr. Training's comment, and my question is, was the administration able to negotiate a better price for HANA by any chance?
I don't have the details of whether or not there's been any adjustments to the actual pricing. I had heard that there's a possibility.
Well, I will ask all of them. Thank you.
All right, the decision on whether or not to take it to the Assembly, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit, and I'll just throw it all out there. It has not been made yet. I've been told, that's why I'm late. I've been told that decision will be made by the end of this afternoon, and I'm trying. But as he just says, we're trying. To answer your specific question, Elby, the HANA license is the same as what it was before. The EMS piece is the same as it was before. The HEC piece, however, is actually more for less. So when you see that particular one, we actually have been able to negotiate a better price with more SAP doing more of the work at a cheaper price.
So if I can follow up, Mr. Chairman, before I'm going to...
You're ready.
When you see those memos, that's what that's doing.
Right, and just the more for less. So we're paying a little bit more, but we're getting a whole lot more for what we're paying. Is that what you're saying?
No, we're getting more services at a cheaper price than the memo you would have seen back in.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Mr. Training, thank you.
Here's the deal on HANA. If I remember our last meetings, if we're staying with SAP, the new updated SAP is going to demand that you're using HANA.
That's
Sure.
the uplift to be able to do it. Yeah.
So, when are we going to have HANA coming in front of us? If we know, in fact, the new system upgrade SAP is going to require it.
I am attempting to get it there through phase tomorrow. It's not my decision whether it's on or not.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Training.
I will know by this afternoon if it will be
Fair enough. Mr. Boston.
Can you just articulate for me when you said HEC? Is that an acronym for?
That is, it's basically the off-site hosting of the capability. The IT servers, the boxes, and on an off-site basis. It's the hosting. Think of that gets posted.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Please continue. Did you have a question, Mr.
I do, and I apologize because I have a 1 o'clock meeting, and
All right.
so I'm going out of
Okay.
order. You keep, I noticed that you don't have anything about the
I think-
enterprise content management. You have it in here, but
Apparently the printout is missing the even pages, so
Oh, okay.
I
There's a
apologize.
slide for ECM on.
But there's a slide about ECM in here.
okay.
So we're missing 811.
Yeah.
Because you usually have something about it, so I have a question about it.
Okay.
My question is, since that is an expansion of scope, or at least that's,
Wasn't scoped before.
It was not in scope, pre-administration change.
is it your opinion that it's something that we need to do at this point in the process, or is it something that we could go back and do it later on?
You certainly can treat it as a separate project and push it behind. The downside of that is that until you get there, you're going to be using the default approach, which happens to be a relatively inefficient way of tracking and staying on top of documents. And so it just ends up being a way of cluttering the system. That's what happens. So yes, you can. Does it make sense? Probably not. Certainly, as an absolute minimum, I believe you should be designing for it while you're designing everything else.
So
Okay?
you do feel, even though it's an expansion of scope, you're basically putting your sort of mark of approval on it.
Sure. I mean, the committee says the same thing. I mean, when you see, I mean, they're actually right on
I
board.
guess I've seen this slide.
Oh, yeah, well, because it's an expansion of scope, it's more money.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Please continue.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to recap very quickly some of the recommendations that the committee made. They had some recommendations regarding the leadership, and so they reminded everybody that they thought, what the mayor's role should be. They talked about the role of the executive team and how they should be involved. And they also talked about the Synergy Program Manager, and that person has a name now, and I think that's you, right?
Program sponsor.
They called it Program Manager, but I think it means you. So, so they were very specific about what needed to happen there with regard to leadership. They also had some technology recommendations, and just to recap, upgrade to the current version of SAP. We've heard that before. They basically all agree you got to do this.
Mr.
Okay.
Trainee, one moment, please.
The
Sure.
current version and when is the new version that mandates HANA coming out? What's the time difference?
But right now, it's
Right
out.
now. So the one, if we update the current version, that is going to require HANA.
Correct.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, make a decision on HANA, HEC, and AMS. AMS, by the way, is the new version of SAP. Just different letters. Okay. And switch from Kronos to SAP for time management. We talked about that. Utilize the third-party hosting for about 2 to 3 years. Now, this is important, where they're basically saying, go ahead and let someone else run the system for you, and they're basically saying for 2 to 3 years. Okay, that's in their recommendation document, so that you don't have to rely on changes in your internal IT department today and your infrastructure today. Okay, so that makes an awful lot of sense. That's where they're coming from. And then the one thing that I think is a little piece that is overlooked quite a bit, and that is, and they brought this up, do your desktops today, or will they handle the new system when you go live?
One moment, please, Mr. Trainee.
Now, if everybody's system are running on some of our desktops, it won't, and you're right. We've got to make sure that every desktop is people running SAP. Otherwise, you might as well not even do the things that people doing the desktops can't get to it.
And that's potentially a hidden cost.
Yeah.
Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Zig.
This is their long description of all the various comments about enterprise content management. The bottom line is the committee is very positive on that. They explain the reasons why it is important and why you should use it. And it's unfortunate. I mean that everybody figured out, I guess, late in the game that we really didn't talk about that very effectively pre-new administration time frame. So early in this year, But it is identified, it's a gap in the design, needs to be done. And as I said, I would suggest to you, you really need to include the design of the activities for ECM as you're doing design for everything else. Okay? Do have some questions for you though, because it is a little bit new and different, and that is, and I think that these need to be answered. Should the initiative be part of the Synergy project? Okay, let's make a call on that. If it is a part of the Synergy project, do you have to go through the standard procurement cycle? If you do, that's an elapsed time issue that you need to address. Or are you going to go out and say, okay, what are my requirements? Again, if you do that while you're doing blueprinting, then your requirements fall right out. Then you got to go through an RFP and you got to go through a selection. I don't know. If yes, should the requirements be developed in conjunction with the blueprint? Just said that. And if no, at what point does the solution acquisition start? So if you decide not to do it now, and you're going to push it off and do it later, then when are you going to start doing that? Because again, there's a cycle of anywhere from 3 to 6 months that you've got to go through just to get the product.
Hold a moment, Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Zig, I was just wondering, you were saying that this procurement cycle, we have to make some sort of decision. Does this push back our go-live date if we postpone this decision?
Shouldn't. But you do. But the issue is you do have to decide. It is a separate product. It's a different product. It's not SAP. I mean, that's the reason why I'm sitting there thinking you probably have to go through some kind of procurement cycle. I mean, you can't just change order your acquisition contract with SAP. Can't do it. I don't think. I could be wrong. I mean, I could get surprised.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson.
Okay. So, and if you don't do it, do you get a separate team set up to do ECM? So those are all questions I think should be addressed fairly quickly. They're fairly easy to address. I mean, I just think that they have not been very clear about laying that out for you at this point in time. Now, the committee made some change management recommendations. Again, I'm just kind of recapping them here. I think that the important thing is that they're saying change management is important. I mean, that's what they were trying to say, and that we need to recognize that there's going to be pushback. Okay, there's going to be pushback. This is a new system. It's not PeopleSoft. It's not what we've done before. All that kind of thing is going to happen. So the whole idea is that you need to manage that process of how do you get the change to happen. Okay, and the way to do that is you have change leadership. You have folks that are paying attention to that and planning it and organizing it early in the game, so you prepare people. Okay, so now. Good news, the SAP methodology calls for that. There's no question about it. That's great. I'm glad they do. Okay. The good news is that we had a change management manager, project manager. That person's not coming back. Got somebody else in there. Okay. The thing that I suggest is missing that needs to happen is that a person who is running the change management efforts can be, without a doubt, a contractor. However, it will make this easier and smoother if the change leader is an executive from the administration. Okay? So that there's no reason in the world why you can't have a dual leadership situation where you've got a contractor who's taking care of all the details, but you've got somebody else who's the champion, who's the visionary, who's out there telling the organization this is a good thing and here's why and here's why you need to get on board. Okay? So that's a recommendation that I have in that area. I thought it was interesting that budget management, which as you know I've mentioned time and time again, it is a module that has been purchased and you own it. It's the SAP module and it keeps getting kind of shunted aside. I thought it was interesting that in their report, one of the reasons they gave why PeopleSoft is not a good continuing solution is because budget was never implemented for PeopleSoft. So I asked the question, are we going down a parallel path? you're going down a path that if you don't address budget management as part of your SAP solution, are you going to find yourself 5 years or 10 years from now running SAP and you still don't have automated budget management? Because you didn't address it. And especially in the last question is if you don't address it and don't sit there and think about it, call it phase 2, call it phase 10. Doesn't matter.
I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but Mr. Trainer.
You say we bought the budget module already?
Correct.
We bought it.
Absolutely. You own it. Okay? It's just that you have not budgeted or planned when it's going to be done very specifically, nor have you estimated how much money it's going to cost you and when it's going to really turn over. I mean, there are some conversations, but you haven't received any information that says, well, this is how much it's going to cost us. And it needs to, somehow I think it needs to be addressed.
Why do we call this SAP? I thought you said the name was changed to AMS now.
It's their module name.
Okay.
I have a comment before we move on, all right? And it doesn't matter whether or not I like this administration, but let's not forget, where this project was, okay? And I think that given some time in terms of the budget module, I think, and we do have an assembly SAP committee where Mr. Thurman will be giving us a presentation, but I think given some time, that issue in terms of the budget module will be dealt with, because it wasn't dealt with before they went over. So I just wanted to make that point. It was important
You bet.
to make that point. Thank you.
You bet.
Please continue.
Okay. Just want to give you some perception of what's left out there to do. Now, there's no question that there's a new program manager in play. The rest of the blueprint is being replanned and rescheduled, and all that is going on as we speak. But there was a plan for a blueprint before the pause. I mean, then this is a summary of the blueprint of the plan before the pause. And I'm just trying to show you which of the tasks that have 0% complete. In other words, there's just a long list of things that still need to be done. And it's just a matter of understanding that and realizing that there are some things that were completed before the pause, but there are still some things left to be done at the conclusion of the pause. The most important ones are the ones that are highlighted in yellow, and that's the to-be blueprint. That's the future. That's the design. That still needs to be done. Okay, and that's fine. I mean, but we just need to recognize that it's not a matter of just saying, oh, we're halfway there. Well, we're 0 way there on some of the things. Okay? So what's the outlook? You've seen this before. Just trying to show you functionally how this whole thing fits together, letting you know that there's now a target for blueprinting, finishing the blueprinting. It's 3/1/2016. That's the target. Okay, now, the other thing that I've tried to show here is, okay, we kind of got to move that Chronos, the new SAP box, I moved that to the left so it's underneath the blueprint B. That's the remaining blueprint work. But we also have software infrastructure and upgrade. That's the piece that has to get done before you can start the financial and the HCM design and configuration. Crucial. Okay? Crucial that happens.
Mr. Trainer?
Jake, does that have to be done before we can start the work on the budget module? Or could we actually start the work on the budget module now?
You can do design work now. I mean, blueprinting is all about design. Okay, but when you start talking about development and configuration, you start talking about literally touching the system and making entries into the system, you got to have the system in place and the infrastructure in place to do that. And now the term that SAP uses in their methodology is realization. Okay, but that's what you're talking about. I mean, so until you have that latest version of the software, until you have that infrastructure in place, meaning the database and so forth, the hardware and all that kind of thing, until you have that in place, people can't do that work. They just can't do the development work and the configuration work.
Thank you, Mr. Trainer.
Okay?
Please continue.
Okay. So what's the outlook? So basically I'm suggesting to you that the MOA is faced with about 12 to 18 months of elapsed time to complete the project following blueprint. So it's some kind, there's some range out there. And that's going to be negotiable, and you're going to be working that out with whoever becomes your implementer. And I would say to you that the blueprinting has an excellent chance of completing by 3/1. The blueprinting, that's the design work. I mean, people are ramping up, things are moving along reasonably well, got some, folks in place, it's working great. Now, here's the lead statement. Development and configuration, which is what SAP refers to as realization, could begin immediately after blueprinting if the software and the infrastructure is ready. If it's not, you're going down the path of delay. So the critical path item, we're just repeating that. So we need to have that stuff in place. The thing that we need to recognize, and this was discussed and presented to you, I think, 6 months ago. What was it going to take to get up to a new version of SAP, and what was it going to take to get a new infrastructure in place? And at the time, there were two choices. One was 9 months to do it yourself, okay? And the other was if you ask SAP to do it, it'd be 3 months. Okay, so that was the deal. So that's why you're now seeing conversations about, okay, the right answer is let's go with HANA HEC AMS. That takes 3 months. If we get approval from the assembly on November the 10th, we got 3 months. Bang, everything goes. We can start coding and start doing development work and configuration work on 3/1/2016. Okay? And every time we miss an assembly meeting, it pushes it a month. And the other thing you got to realize that at the back end, every time you move something a month, you conceivably are moving it an entire quarter because the whole HCM system has got to basically go live on a quarter. Okay? So the conclusions are the project has restarted and exhibits some energy. That you're definitely obtaining your SAP knowledgeable resources, and that appears to be on track. Virtually the entire synergy management team is now SAP. You need to realize that that's what has happened now. Okay, and that MOA. This is the ZCO recommendation should establish an MOA executive as the change leader, and you definitely should move forward with that HANA HEC AMS activity. Definitely should move forward with that, and really urge the administration to get that to you so that you can do your job on the 10th.
Are you done?
I'm finished.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sig, I just want to say I appreciate, though I haven't made every single meeting, I've read all of your updates, and I appreciate it. I would say from my perspective, I gave the last administration one chance to get it right. In my eyes, due to leadership, I think, and a large part there was a failure. So I'll give this administration one chance. But I rely heavily on what you say in order to get us through this project. And I think it's been a value to not only me, but I know people that I have to answer to, the voters. I can rely on. I can go back and and I have referenced some of your reports and said, listen, these are our choices. So I just want to say thank you. It's been very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson.
I have 1 second.
Oh, go ahead.
When you're talking about the change leader, are we specifically referring to Alden, or is that a specific?
No, that would not be Alden. That would not be Alden's job.
So we haven't identified yet the change leader.
That's correct.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I wasn't commingling the two.
And I am pretty sure that this may be the first time anybody on the administration side has heard that actually said that way.
All right. Well, it'll be interesting to me to see the administration's response to that because, like I said, as the independent person that's viewing this for the assembly, I appreciate your commentary and I do greatly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. And Mr. Lawson, thank you for saying that. I have to echo her comments because we went through this process to hire our independent contractor. And I know based on your report and the job that you're doing, we made the right decision hiring you. And I respect the report, so I really appreciate the job that you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Training?
The two other people have said, we appreciate every dollar we spend on you because we're getting our value for the dollars we spend with all your recommendations. To Alden, 10 November. I want to see this in front of the assembly because I don't intend to burn any more daylight on this thing. We know we've got to do. I want the administration to have a document for us to approve. New business on the 7th of November.
Mr. Train,
Ma'am?
didn't we postpone it under old business?
No, they can come back. I think.
Did we?
They can bring it to us.
We did.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I went back to you.
Did you have anybody else have any comments? Okay, well, session is adjourned. Thank you.